Hi, this is Jack Downs, and this screencast is to introduce some of the Audacity tools and tasks and commands. Here they are, by the way, that you need for our first project in Audacity. These are the things we're going to go over: how to save, select, zoom, use the space bar, the transporter toolbar, important keys C, B, and 1. You could write this stuff down if you want. Cut, Control X, trim, find zero crossings, normalize, export, and then for an edit file, a partial file, and then do a final export. There we go. First off, you should have your headphones on. You should be working from a file which is not on your flash drive, right? But is on your hard drive or thaw space or that sort of thing. We go File Import Audio. And remember, you have a file folder structure, right? And the original file is an original file folder. And we open it up. What is this file? You should always listen to things first.
From the city of Plattsburgh, 4th of July Parade for audio-video productions, I'm John Burgess.
Okay, this is the voice edit file. I'm not going to do the project for you, but I'm going to give you a few tips and things you need to know about. First of all, I used the transport toolbar just then, right, to play or pause. I could, okay, or stop. Push my cursor, my scrubber, my active area back to the start, or skip to the end and record, which we're not going to do. I wanted to talk to you about zoom, though, before we talk about selecting. View, you get to zoom commands through view, and then we get to the zoom commands over here, too. So let's go to view, fit vertically. I like fit vertically because it expands the tracks so we can see them easily. Okay. If we want to select, we already automatically have the selection tool chosen when we open up the file. It's the one we're going to use almost all the time, maybe time shift once in a while, and envelope, we'll get to that sometime. I would ignore the others. I ignore all this stuff here. Pretty much ignore this stuff. You can look at it if you want. It's other commands we use instead. We use these guys a lot. I'll show you in a minute. Okay, how do you select something? Well, to select something, you just drag around it. Okay, I've selected that stuff. What if I wanted to hear that? Okay, I can use transport toolbar, of course, but I can use my space bar.
Plattsburgh, 4th of July.
Hitting the space bar and then hitting again, hitting the space bar, then hitting again, space bar play, space bar again, stop. So that's a quick way to listen to things that are selected. If I don't have anything selected, it'll play from my cursor, or if my cursor is the beginning, it'll play the whole thing. And again, I can use space bar again to stop it. Let's imagine I do have a selected area right here. I want to look in close at it, which you commonly want to do. I can fit that selection right there. Fit the selection. It zooms into that selection. I could zoom in further. I could zoom out a little bit so I can see the selection a little more. I could go back to see the whole thing. Fit project, right? Okay, let's say I have made a selection like this dead air at the beginning. I can listen to it. I don't hear anything. It's dead air. I want to delete it. I could use the delete key or Control X. Control X, you have the benefit of being able to paste it back, but might as well use the delete key because you always have a Control Z to get back to it. Whoa, I just Control Z right out of that file. I have to import it again. Okay, so my Control Z's and my undos and redos are up here also. I can reach them up there on the toolbar. I'm going to go to view vertically. Okay, so we did the zoom, spacebar, transport toolbar. Let's imagine I do have something selected, like this stuff right here, perhaps, right? And I want to use some keys to hear the selection in different ways. One of the keys I could use anywhere, actually, regardless of selection, is the number 1. If my cursor is someplace, it plays me 1 second of audio right around my cursor, either side of it. So that's a way to move around and listen to things. However, I could also use the B key. B will play from my cursor to the selection, or from the start of the selection to my cursor, or from my cursor to the end of the selection, or from the selection to my cursor. So I can do that. By the way, if I want to expand my selection a little bit, or change it, I can go like that. Change it to a hand. And then if I zoom in and do that, I have a lot more control. Okay, now let's imagine that, however, I've decided I want to remove this, which is commonly what we do. We select things and delete it or cut it. I want to remove this, but I want to know, first of all, what is it going to sound like without it? I use the C key.
From the city of Parade for From the City of Parade for
The C key gives me a cut preview. It shows me what that will sound like without really doing the cut preview. Okay, what about if I've decided I really do want to cut this? What do I do? Well, before you really do the delete key or the Control X key, what I suggest you do is go to Edit, find Zero Crossings. Well, what are zero crossings? If I zoom in and zoom way in, there are shortcut keys for this, but I use the toolbar, and I go to the edge of my selection, which is right here, I see that I would be cutting the file at that point right there. A zero crossing is where the waveform crosses the zero mark, the zero axis. So what I'd have to do manually is move it to here and go to the other side of the selection and move my selection to a 0 point so that they matched up. Otherwise, you jump from one point to another, they're not matched up, and you get a little pop noise in your recording. So instead of doing that, I'm going to zoom out, by the way. I've decided I'm going to select it. I've selected that. I'm going to delete it or cut it. And instead of doing that manually, I can go to Edit, find Zero Crossings, and it makes a tiny, tiny change to the selection to get to the zero crossings. Okay, if I want to delete something from within a file, again, I just, even if it's in the middle, I just hit Delete or Control X and it takes it out. What if, on the other hand, I didn't want to delete this, I didn't want to cut it, I wanted to trim. Trim is removing everything else, right? Leaving this, removing everything else. I would still do that, find zero crossings. I could. It's not as important, I suppose. And I can go to Edit, Trim, which is Control T. That removes everything else. Let's imagine that, I'm going to do Control Z, that at some point in my work I decide I have to save my file. You should be saving regularly. Save project as is your first, should be your first save. You probably should do that right after you open it. You're going to save that into your working files folder again, and you can keep that name, and it's going to create stuff in there. I've already done an earlier one. That's what it looks like. So I'm not going to do that right now. So saving your project, then doing regular saves as you go along, updates that AUP file, which you can get back to and use if you want. But at a certain point, you may be not done, but you want to be able to come back to a WAV file, a high quality file, like an AUP file, but one we're used to listening to. You can always go File, Export, not Export Selection, but Export, choose a WAV, give it a name, right, and call it something like music something capital edit, or some other keyword that lets you know that this file isn't complete, right, but it's close, and or it's something I want to come back to and work some more. So getting a WAV file to reopen in the future is a good thing. Saving regularly as WAV files in your working files folder again. Okay, that's good. But eventually, you're going to be close to being done. Say, imagine I think I'm all done. The last thing we do, usually the last thing, is normalize. Effect normalize. What normalize does is it will, in a recording which is a little bit weak, a little bit low in amplitude or volume, it will expand the volume of amplitude of it all to a certain point based on decibels. We usually go to -1 dB, which is, in other words, 1 decibel before it would hit the maximum. Hitting the maximum is bad because it causes distortion. Going beyond the maximum causes clipping and distortion. We call that clipping. So these are fine, these settings. And I say OK, it expands the amplitude of the file. And that means that the file is ready to go. And then I would go File, Export. I perhaps to do another WAV file, but I want to make sure my final file, with the naming suggestions I gave you, is exported as an MP3 file. That's the one for grading. It's a smaller, so perhaps a little lower quality, yes. It's compressed, it's smaller, it's commonly what we listen to on the web. So that's, and then you go ahead and do your export. By the way, whenever you go to do an export, it gives you this bunch of stuff here. Don't worry about it, just say OK. We're not going to be filling in the tags at this point. Okay, that was well, pretty well went through saving, selecting, zooming, spacebar, transport, CB in 1, cut or delete, Control X, trim, finding zero crossings, normalizing, exporting a file, an edit file, and doing a final export.